Chapter 33, Part 4, Confrontations. The air within the Temple of Crystals hung heavy with a cool metallic tang, a stark contrast to the crisp mountain air they had just left behind. Light, fractured and refracted through the 8 colossal crystals dominating the cavern, painted the chamber in shifting hues of red, yellow, blue, orange, green, purple, white, and black. The sheer scale of the crystals, each a natural fusion of stalagmite and stalactite reaching towards the cavern's unseen ceiling, instilled a sense of awe and ancient power. Lucas, Mina, Thomas, Candace, Dira, and Altheris moved as a unit, their footsteps echoing softly on the cavern floor. Behind them, Queen Apharosia observed with a regal stillness, her silver hair catching the ethereal light. Vermicalis, his face etched with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination, led the way, his hand never straying far from the spear at his side. The reopened entrance tunnel, a testament to the researchers' intrusion, felt like a wound in the mountain's heart. They had ventured into the Watcher's heart seeking answers, a recovery of history. What they found was not the silent wisdom they had hoped for, but a figure standing amidst the crystalline glow, radiating an unsettling familiarity. It was him. The gaunt features, the intense gaze, the coat with the now recognizable insignia, the researcher from Kingston. He stood near the base of the towering blue crystal, his posture suggesting he had been expecting them. But he was not alone. To his left stood a figure clad in practical dark armor that seemed a blend of modern and archaic design. The mercenary's stance was relaxed yet alert, a hand resting near what appeared to be a sidearm holstered at their hip. Their helmet obscured their face, but their build spoke of lean muscle and combat readiness. This was someone accustomed to conflict, a stark contrast to the scholarly air of the chamber. To the researcher's right stood a woman, her eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and professional curiosity as she took in the temple's grandeur. She carried a satchel overflowing with scrolls and what looked like sketching materials. Her attire was simple but functional, suggesting a life spent in study, and perhaps a fair amount of travel. A tense silence descended upon the cavern. The only sounds were the faint hum emanating from the crystals and the soft breathing of the assembled party. It was broken by the researcher, his voice cutting through the stillness with an edge of weary familiarity. "Well, well," he began, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Look who finally decided to join the party." His gaze swept over Lucas, lingering for a moment before moving to Mina, then Thomas, and finally settling on Queen Apharosia. "Your Majesty," he offered a curt nod, "and Vermicalis. It's been a while." Vermicalis's grip tightened on his spear. "Researcher," he growled, the name laced with suspicion. "What is the meaning of this intrusion? This temple is sacred." The researcher sighed, a sound that conveyed more annoyance than contrition. "Intrusion? My dear Vermicalis, I prefer to think of it as a long-awaited reunion. We all have a vested interest in what lies within these walls, wouldn't you agree?" He gestured around the cavern with a gloved hand. "The secrets held by these magnificent crystals, the echoes of the past, they concern us all." Lucas stepped forward slightly, his hand instinctively moving towards the relic on his wrist. "You know who we are," he stated, his voice low and steady despite the knot of unease in his stomach. The researcher's gaze snapped back to Lucas, a flicker of something unreadable in his intense eyes. "Of course, Lucas. How could I forget? You and Mina. The key, wouldn't you say?" He then turned to the mercenary. "This," he said, gesturing to the armored figure, "is Kael. He's ensuring our continued conversation remains civil." Kael offered a slight inclination of their helmeted head, their posture unwavering. He then turned to the woman beside him. "And this is Elara. Her expertise lies in the very stones we stand amongst. Nithari lore, the legends of the Watcher, she's quite the scholar." Elara offered a polite nod to the group, her eyes still darting around the cavern, taking in every detail. "I am Elias Thorne," the researcher finally stated, his gaze meeting Lucas's directly. "Formerly of the Kingston Medi-Laboratory. Though I suspect you already knew that, didn't you, Lucas?" The name hung in the air, heavy with the weight of Lucas's past. Memories of sterile white walls, cold metal instruments, and the constant probing gazes of scientists flooded his mind. The resentment he had tried to bury resurfaced, sharp and bitter. "Thorne," Lucas repeated, the name feeling foreign and yet intimately familiar at the same time. What do you want?" Thorne's expression softened, a hint of what might have been genuine remorse in his eyes. "What I've always wanted, Lucas. To understand. To help you understand. What happened in Kingston, it wasn't supposed to happen the way it did." Thomas shifted beside Lucas, his hand resting on the hilt of his own weapon. "You experimented on him. On children. What understanding could you possibly offer?" Thorne turned to Thomas, his gaze unwavering. "The experiments were necessary. In the face of a greater threat, sacrifices had to be made. I understand that may be difficult for you to accept, but the disciples, they are a danger to this entire world. And Lucas holds the key to stopping them." Mina, her bright green eyes narrowed, spoke for the first time. "You said Lucas and I are the key. What does that mean?" Her telepathic link with Lucas thrummed with a shared sense of urgency and suspicion. Thorne's gaze returned to Mina, a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. "You, Mina, are intrinsically linked to him. The children of Hybris, the prophecy speaks of your combined power. A power that needs to be understood, nurtured, and ultimately controlled." Queen Apharosia stepped forward, her voice carrying an undeniable authority. "Your presence here is unexpected, Thorne. My people have guarded this temple for centuries. What gives you the right to simply walk in?" Thorne inclined his head respectfully. "Your Majesty, my intentions are not malicious. In fact, they align with yours, I believe. The prophecy of the Sent Ones, the threat of the disciples, these are not matters to be taken lightly. I have knowledge that can help you, knowledge that can help Lucas and Mina unlock their potential and face what is coming." Vermicalis remained skeptical. "What knowledge could you possibly possess that we do not?" "You are an outsider, a member of the regime that sought to exploit the very relics we are sworn to protect." "The regime fell, Vermicalis," Thorne countered, his voice hardening slightly. "And I am no longer bound by their dictates. My research," it continued, "I learned things they never understood. Things about the relics, about the prophecy, about the true nature of the disciples' power." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled group. "And I believe that together we can uncover the truth that lies at the heart of this temple." Elara, the historian, finally spoke, her voice soft but filled with an eager curiosity. "The carvings, the crystals themselves, they tell a story that has been fragmented and misinterpreted for centuries, perhaps with a fresh perspective." She trailed off, her gaze fixed on the intricate carvings adorning the cavern walls. Kael, the mercenary, remained silent, their presence a constant reminder of the potential for conflict. The air in the Temple of Crystals remained thick with tension. The initial awe of the location, now overshadowed by the unsettling presence of Elias Thorne and his companions. The confrontation had begun, and the answers they sought within the heart of the Watcher were now inextricably linked to the man who had once held Lucas captive. The long-awaited reunion had arrived, and its consequences remained to be seen. The weight of Elias Thorne's words settled upon the group, a palpable tension replacing the initial shock of his appearance. Lucas, his gaze fixed on Thorne's earnest yet unsettling face, felt the familiar pull of his telepathic abilities. He needed to know. Was this man truly offering help, or was this another manipulation, another layer of the complex web that had ensnared his life? Without a word, Lucas subtly shifted his focus inward, reaching out with his mind towards Thorne. It was a delicate process, like extending a tendril into murky water. He wasn't trying to delve deep into Thorne's memories. Not yet. His initial goal was simpler, to skim the surface of his thoughts, to catch the immediate currents of his intentions, to detect the subtle tremors of deception that often betrayed a lie. He focused on Thorne's posture, the slight tremor in his gloved hands, the way his eyes flickered between the members of their group. These were external cues, but Lucas hoped to corroborate them with the internal landscape of Thorne's mind. The first sensation was a wall, not of active resistance, but of a strange static. It was as if Thorne's thoughts were shielded by a layer of interference, a buzzing undercurrent that made it difficult to gain a clear reading. Lucas pressed slightly harder, pushing past the initial resistance, seeking a clearer signal. Then, a jolt. It wasn't a mental pushback, but a sudden awareness, a prickling sensation as if he had been caught staring. Thorne's eyes, which had been addressing Queen Apharosia, snapped back to Lucas, his gaze sharpening with an unnerving intensity. A faint smile, devoid of warmth, touched Thorne's lips. "Trying to get a peek under the hood, are we, Lucas?" His voice remained conversational, but there was an undeniable edge to it. "I wouldn't advise it. You might find the engine room a bit messy." Lucas instantly retracted his mental probe, a cold knot forming in his stomach. Thorne had noticed, not only noticed, but seemed entirely unsurprised. Thorne then turned his attention to the armored figure beside him, Kael. "Kael," he said, his voice calm, but carrying a clear instruction. "Keep a close eye on our young telepath here. If I start acting unusually, shall we say it might be due to his extracurricular mental activities? In such a case, prioritize my well-being." Kael's helmeted head dipped in a silent acknowledgement. The mercenaries' stance remained the same, but Lucas felt the subtle shift in their focus, a newfound alertness directed squarely at him. The weight of Kael's potential threat settled heavily in the cavern. This was not just a scholar. Thorne had brought protection, someone capable of swift and decisive action. The other members of the group reacted in various ways. Mina's hand instinctively reached for Lucas's arm, her green eyes filled with concern. Their telepathic link flickered with a shared sense of unease. Thomas's posture stiffened, his hand now firmly on the hilt of his sword, his gaze fixed on Kael. Candace's amber eyes narrowed, her gaze darting between Thorne, Lucas, and the silent mercenary, assessing the immediate threat. Dira took a small step back, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her notebook. Alderus, ever vigilant, scanned the surroundings, his hand near the hilt of his own blade. Queen Apharosia's expression remained unreadable, but Lucas sensed a subtle tightening in the air around her, a barely perceptible shift in the magical energies she commanded. Vermiculus simply glared at Thorne, his suspicion now visibly intensified. Elias Thorne, seemingly unfazed by the reactions he had provoked, continued to address the group. "As I was saying, Your Majesty, Vermiculus, my intentions are not hostile. Quite the opposite, but I will not tolerate any unauthorized intrusions into my privacy. We can work together, we can share information, but it will be on my terms." He turned back to Lucas, his gaze direct and unwavering. "Consider that a friendly warning, Lucas. Some minds are not meant to be read, especially by those who do not fully understand what they might find." The veiled threat hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the unknown depths of Thorne's past and the potential power he might wield. Lucas met Thorne's gaze, his own determination hardening. He wouldn't be deterred. He needed to know the truth, not just for himself, but for Mina, for Thomas, for everyone who had been caught in the crosshairs of the disciples and the machinations that had led them here. "What kind of knowledge do you have?" Lucas asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. "Knowledge about the relics? About the prophecy?" Thorne's lips curved into a genuine smile this time, though it still held a hint of calculation. "Patience, Lucas. All in good time. First, perhaps we should establish some ground rules. And then we can delve into the fascinating history of this temple, the secrets it holds, and the role you and Mina play in the events to come." He gestured towards the heart of the cavern, the colossal crystals radiating their otherworldly light. "There is much to discuss, and time, I fear, is not on our side." Elara, the historian, took a tentative step forward, her eyes shining with excitement. The inscriptions on the base of the red crystal, they seemed to depict a ritual, a connection between the crystals and beings of immense power. She pulled out her sketchbook, her fingers already flying across the page, capturing the intricate details. The tension in the Temple of Crystals remained thick, a fragile truce established by Thorne's warning. Lucas knew this confrontation was far from over. The mental sparring had just begun, and the true nature of Elias Thorne's presence here remained a dangerous enigma. He would need to be cautious, to observe, to wait for an opportunity to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath the researcher's carefully constructed facade. The whispers of doubt and suspicion echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked within the shadows of the past, and the uncertain path that lay ahead. Elias Thorne's gaze swept across the stunned faces of the assembled group, his own expression grim. "The energy matrix within this temple," he began, his voice resonating with an urgency that was hard to ignore, has reached a critical point. For centuries, perhaps even millennia, these crystals have been accumulating arcane energy, drawing it from the very fabric of this world, from the ley lines that crisscross the planet, perhaps even from beyond. He gestured towards the towering formations. Think of them as colossal capacitors, each one saturated beyond capacity. The natural balance that once contained this power, it's failing. The structural integrity of this formation, both physical and energetic, is about to give way. A low murmur rippled through the group. Vermicalus's brow furrowed with concern, his suspicion momentarily overshadowed by the gravity of Thorne's words. Queen Apharosia's usual composure seemed to waver, a flicker of alarm in her silver eyes. "And what exactly does this bursting entail?" Thomas asked, his voice laced with skepticism but also a hint of fear. Thorne's gaze met Thomas's. "Imagine a dam breaking, but instead of water, it's raw arcane energy. Waves of it, radiating outwards in all directions. These waves will propagate through the arcane field that permeates our world. A field that underpins magic, affects the very weather patterns, and sustains the delicate balance of our ecosystems." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. If this energy is released unchecked, the consequences could be catastrophic. We're talking about a planet-wide resonance, a destabilization of the arcane field that could last for years, perhaps even decades. The delicate equilibrium of nature could be shattered. We might see unprecedented environmental disasters, the collapse of entire ecosystems. Candace stepped forward, her amber eyes troubled. "You mentioned arcane storms. Would they become worse?" "Worse," Thorne echoed, a wry smile touching his lips. "Imagine the fiercest storm you've ever witnessed, amplified tenfold, occurring with terrifying frequency. The arcane field is the engine that drives these storms. A massive energy release like this would be like throwing a boulder into a calm lake, creating ripples that become tsunamis. We could see storms of unimaginable intensity, unpredictable and devastating." Dira's breath hitched. "And unknown things. What did you mean by that?" Thorne's gaze turned somber. "The arcane field is still largely a mystery, despite centuries of study. We know it interacts with magic, with life, with the very fabric of reality in ways we don't fully comprehend. A surge of this magnitude could trigger unforeseen phenomena, awaken dormant energies, or even attract things from beyond our understanding." The silence that followed was heavy with apprehension. The vibrant hues of the crystals seemed to dim, their beauty now tinged with a sense of impending doom. Lucas, his mind racing, felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. If what Thorne said was true, the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. He looked at Mina, her face pale with concern, then at Thomas, his jaw tight with worry. He needed to be sure. Despite Thorne's earlier warning, Lucas made a decision. He stepped forward, his gaze meeting Thorne's directly. "I need to know if you're telling the truth," he said, his voice firm. "I need to see it for myself." Thorne's eyebrows rose slightly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "And how do you propose to do that, Lucas?" "I want to read your mind," Lucas stated plainly. "Just for a few seconds. I swear, I won't try anything funny. I just need to see if what you're saying is the truth." A tense silence descended once more. Kael's posture subtly shifted, their hand moving closer to their sidearm. Thorne considered Lucas for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. "Very well, Lucas. A few seconds. But if I sense even a hint of probing beyond the surface, our agreement ends immediately." He nodded slowly. "Proceed." Lucas focused his mind, reaching out to Thorne once more. This time, Thorne offered no resistance, allowing Lucas a brief glimpse into his thoughts. It was a chaotic swirl of complex calculations, scientific observations, and a deep, underlying sense of urgency. Lucas didn't delve into personal feelings or hidden motives, focusing solely on the information Thorne had just presented. He saw vivid mental simulations of energy cascading through intricate crystal lattices, visualizations of arcane waves rippling across a planetary sphere, and stark projections of environmental devastation. The feelings associated with these thoughts were not of malice or deception, but of genuine concern and a desperate need to avert a crisis. There was a weariness, a sense of being burdened by this knowledge. Lucas couldn't detect any immediate contradictions, no hidden agenda that screamed of a lie. The deep, complex layers of Thorne's personality remained obscured, but the immediate threat he described felt terrifyingly real within the confines of his mind. After a few heartbeats, Lucas withdrew, a sense of grim certainty settling within him. He looked at the group. "He's telling the truth," he said, his voice low and serious. "At least about this. I didn't sense any lies, any contradictions. He believes this is really happening." He hesitated. The deeper feelings, those are harder to read in such a short time. But the information he gave us, it's there. A collective sigh, a mixture of relief and dread, swept through the group. Queen Apharosia's shoulders seemed to slump almost imperceptibly. Vermicalus's grip on his spear loosened slightly, replaced by a look of grave concern. "So," Thomas said, breaking the heavy silence, his gaze sweeping over the imposing crystals and the unsettling figure of Elias Thorne, "what now?"